Writers capitalize certain words in titles. Let's practice capitalizing titles correctly so our reader gets an idea of what they are about to read. Please have your LearnZillion practice sheet in front of you because you will need it during this lesson. A title is the name of a book, a composition, or some other text. It is found at the beginning of the story or text and tells us what we are about to read. When we write a title, certain words should be capitalized. The first and last word in a title should be capitalized no matter what they are. Then, any other word that is meaningful to the text should be capitalized. Some words don't add meaning to a title. Some examples of these are a, and, the, and, of, for, from, but, with, and by. You can see these are generally shorter words and they do not need to be capitalized. Let's look at these two examples. The teacher from the Black Lagoon. The first and the last words are capitalized, so let's look at the words in between. The word teacher tells us who the story is about. That's important, so it gets capitalized. The word black describes the color of the lagoon, so it gets capitalized too. The words from and the have no real meaning, so they do not need to be capitalized. Here is another example. Our first and last words in the cat and the hat are already capitalized, even though the first word is the. Cat is capitalized because it is important to helping us understand what the story will be about. In and the are small words that really have no meaning, so we can leave them with lowercase letters. Now it's your turn. Here are two titles. Frog and Toad are friends, Harold and the Purple Crayon. Capitalize these titles correctly on your practice sheet. Pause the video while you write. Press play when you are done. Let's check our titles. In this first title, we capitalize frog and friends because they are the first and last words. The only other word that is meaningful to the text is toad, so that should be capitalized too. The shorter words and are don't add meaning for the reader. Our second title should look like this. The first and last words are capitalized, as well as the word purple because it tells about the crayon. The shorter words and the don't add anything meaningful to the title. Here is a draft of a narrative I have been working on. Listen while I read it aloud. I picked out 3 books at the library to read this summer. They sound really interesting. The first one is a fiction book called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It is a very funny book about a kid's adventures. Then I picked out a nonfiction book called Crocodile Encounters and More True Stories of Adventures with Wild Animals. Can you tell I like adventures? Finally, I chose How to Get Rich on the Oregon Trail, which is a fiction book, but it also has facts in it. It is going to be an interesting summer. I realize some of the titles are not written correctly in this paragraph. Let's see if we can correct those. Here is the first sentence that contains a title. The first one is a fiction book called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Do you see the title? It comes after the comma and it is underlined. Book titles get underlined when we handwrite them and italicized when we type them. Since you will be handwriting your titles for this lesson, we are going to use underlining as our standard for writing titles. So I'm thinking about the rules for capitalizing titles. The first rule says to capitalize the first and last words. That means I need to capitalize diary and kid. Help me by circling any other words on your practice sheet that should be capitalized. Pause the video while you do this. Press play when you are finished. Which ones did you circle? Here is what I did. We had already talked about capitalizing diary and kid. Of the words that are in between diary and kid, I'm thinking about which ones are meaningful and important to understanding what the text is about. Of and a are small words that really have no meaning, so I'm going to leave them the way they are. But wimpy describes the kid, so I think that must be important to the story. I circled this word too. Here is how our revised title looks. Does yours look like this too? Great work. Here's the next sentence from my story that has an error. Then I picked out a nonfiction book called Crocodile Encounters and More True Stories of Adventures with Wild Animals. Wow, there are a lot of words in this title. We are going to follow the 2 rules for capitalizing titles. Capitalize the first and last word, and capitalize any other words that are meaningful or important to the text. Follow these 2 rules and circle all the words in this title you think should be capitalized. Pause the video while you write. Press play when you have finished. Did you find all the words? Let's check. The first and last words get capitalized, so I circled crocodile and animals. Now I'm thinking about the words in between. Encounters tells me what I'll be reading about, so that is important. That's a word to capitalize. More True Stories tells me that there will be more than one story in this book, and they will be true, so I circled those too. Adventures tells me what the other stories will be about, and wild tells me the type of animal that those adventures will be about, so I will circle both of those words. The remaining words, and, of, and with, really don't tell me more about the text, so I will leave those as lowercase letters. Here is how our revised title should look. This is the final sentence that needs some correction. Finally, I chose How to Get Rich on the Oregon Trail, which is a fiction book, but it also has facts in it. I see the title of this book is called How to Get Rich on the Oregon Trail. Using the two rules for capitalizing titles, rewrite this title so it is correct. Pause the video while you write. Press play when you are done. How did you do? Let's see how this title should look. The first and last words are capitalized. Then I capitalized Get Rich and Oregon. Get Rich tells me what the story will be about, and Oregon tells me where it will happen. I left to, on, and the as lowercase letters because they are small words that do not have meaning for the text. Doesn't this title look much better now? Great work revising these titles. Listen to our revised draft as I read it aloud. I picked out 3 books at the library to read this summer. They sound really interesting. The first one is a fiction book called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It is a very funny book about a kid's adventures. Then I picked out a nonfiction book called Crocodile Encounters and More True Stories of Adventures with Wild Animals. Can you tell I like adventures? Finally, I chose How to Get Rich on the Oregon Trail, which is a fiction book, but it also has facts in it. It is going to be an interesting summer. Notice how when we capitalize titles correctly, we have a much better understanding about the content of the text the title is referring to. Now it's your turn. Read this draft while I read it aloud. Tasha and Levi are visiting the library in search of some good books to read. Tasha says, I heard The Lion and the Mouse is a really good book. I'm going to look for that one. Levi replies, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has always been one of my favorite stories. I'm going to read it again. Tasha holds up a book. Hey Levi, remember this? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a great story. Let's read it. Reread this draft and revise it using what you learned in this lesson. Pause the video while you write. Press play when you are finished. Now look at your own writing. Reread your own writing and find places where titles can be made clearer by capitalizing them correctly. Be sure to capitalize the first and last word in titles, as well as any word that is important to the text. This will make your writing more understandable to the reader.